Church doesn't end on Sunday, and neither does the conversation. Welcome to Sundays on Monday, the podcast from First UMC Port St. John, where we take Sunday's message and carry it into your week. Together, we're going to dive deeper into faith, upcoming church events, and how we can live out God's Word every day. Your faith-filled Monday starts right here because Sunday's message is just the beginning. Well, welcome, church family. We have a special episode today. Today is going to be part one of a two-part series because you happen to know that our pastor loves to preach in series, so we thought we'd do a series on the podcast. And with that, we're sitting down, actually, with Pastor Chris Tabone, our beloved shepherd, our encourager, and friend, as he prepares to step into the next chapter of his ministry/life, whatever God is calling him to do. Over the past 4 years, Pastor Chris and his family have helped shape our church. They've brought us into modernization. They've led us forward in faith, and they've walked beside us through the seasons of growth, challenge, and transformation. We are so happy to be sitting down with Pastor Chris today. So grab a cup of coffee, settle in, and join us for this conversation with PC.
So Chris, thank you so much for joining us today. We're super glad that you're here. And it's kind of perfect for us because, as many of you know, Mike and I are going on vacation for a couple of weeks. So we're going to give a little bit of a head start so we're not overwhelmed when we get back. So thanks for joining us.
Hey, it is honestly my pleasure to sit and be with you guys here today and to talk about life and faith and our church, and our church family. So I'm really excited. I'm excited to see where the conversation goes as we kind of adventure into this. So I'm excited, and I hope everybody else is as well.
Well, you're excited now. Wait till we get to the questions.
Hey, listen.
Well, we'll start easy. So the question I want to ask first is, you guys are getting ready to take a big step into a new part of your journey. How are you feeling about all this?
I'll be honest. It's a mixture of emotions. On one hand, there's the sense of excitement undertaking something new. When God began to kind of stir this within my heart, within my life, I really didn't know where I was being led or what it would mean. But at the same time, I knew that if God was leading, the only thing I could do is follow. So, there's that sense of excitement, but at the same time, I was reflecting on the fact that I've been in the United Methodist Church for 16 years. Mm-hmm. I started in 2009 at a church in Chicago and have been just kind of doing it ever since. So the other side of the excitement is this nervousness and this perplexity, because I've been in ministry for over 20 years and it's really all I've known for the last, 16 plus years. So doing something new, someplace new, amongst some people who are new is nerve-wracking. So it's just kind of a mixture of emotions, but nonetheless, we feel like, and I feel like God has been slowly closing one door and opening another one, and the only thing I can do is just kind of step through it in faith.
So it's funny. I was thinking today as we were talking several months ago, you said that God laid a word of change on your heart, and at that time, the word change did not mean leaving our church.
No,
it was not. You just felt that something had to change.
Yeah, I mean, I remember when I got here, and I said this to Mick, and I said this to a few other of our leaders. I said the phrase, "It's change or die time," because looking at an organization like the local church, it cannot stay stale and stagnant. Because in business, just as in the church, if you are maintaining the status quo, you're actually slowly just dying.
Yeah.
In the church world, it's growth period, because you have to continue to grow. Healthy things grow. So we had said to some of our leaders early on, it's change or die time. So at the beginning of the year, when God had kind of laid on my heart change, I was thinking, hey, we need to scrap the idea of moving forward with a traditional service, or maybe we need to change our approach to time and our philosophy. Like I was thinking it was something more pragmatic like that until eventually God was like, no, that the change that I need from you is a season of rest. And that's a big change. And
It is.
being obedient to that has been both, again, like I said a minute ago, exciting and scary.
Yeah, like you said, when you first came, we talked about the change, right? And I know over the 4 years we've made some, I'll call small changes. I think some people probably think they're big changes at First UMC, but we've made some small changes in what we're doing. And I know when we sat down with the Jedi Council, our breakfast that we have that we refer to, that we alluded to in service recently, you had mentioned that 2025 was going to be, we needed to make some bigger changes. And and I know you were laying out some plans and things like that. And then, of course, this change, God called you into a different direction.
It's interesting. Carrie and I had talked about how I use the puzzle as an analogy. And I don't know if I've ever shared this with anybody, but I felt like this church is this beautiful puzzle. It's this mosaic that God has been, stitching together. And I felt like my puzzle piece changed a little bit, where I kept trying to force myself into the bigger picture, only to realize that I'm a piece of a different picture. We're all a piece of the greater church. We're all members of, the church universal, as the Apostle Creed says. But my piece here in this local church was shifting a little bit, and I wasn't fitting into it. And it wasn't that it was a bad thing. It was just it was a God ordained kind of shift that was taking place, and one I didn't really at the moment see coming. But looking back,
now you can tell hindsight and all that good stuff.
Hindsight is 20/20. It really is.
Well, let's go back in time a little bit.
Yeah.
So when you first came here to First United Methodist of Port St. John, what was going through your heart and your mind? I mean, it's a big change. I think about this all the time, and I think, wow. I never thought of Claremont as a big place, but then to come to our small little church, I wondered. And then, what were your hopes and prayers for this church?
And I'll say, putting the farewell video together for you when we saw Roger Franklin introducing you on that first Sunday, I can tell folks that when I was looking back at that video, I'll use the term, you looked a little nervous. You looked a little like, what have I got myself into?
Yeah.
What was going through your mind that first Sunday when you got here?
So I think the biggest thing going through my mind was a little bit of imposter syndrome, which is kind of I don't know if it's a new phrase, but it's definitely something that's been more explored as of late. But I felt like the outsider coming in and asking myself constantly, like, am I really equipped? Am I really skilled? Am I really competent enough to do this? I had never been a senior pastor. I had been an associate for a number of years, a youth pastor for a number of years, but I had never been at the helm. So it was this imposter syndrome that was going through my mind of like, am I qualified? Am I competent? Am I skilled enough? And all I could think about was, well, I've watched as people have transitioned in leadership and they've burned bridges and it's not gone well. And I didn't want to burn the bridge. I didn't want to, disregard the past. So, my hope and my prayer early on was like, could we build on whatever legacy has been placed before us, so that building upon that firm foundation, we just get stronger and we get better. So early on, I was jokingly saying things like, I don't know what I don't know. And the reality is there was a lot of things I didn't know. And I feel more confident today saying that I finally have learned that I don't know what I do know. I know that I don't know those things and I'm okay with it. But early on, that transition from Claremont to here, it was a little different coming from a church that had over 2,000 members and over 1,000 people actively engaged in the life of the church on a Sunday morning to, our first few weeks, our first few months, we were like 30 to 40 people. Mm-hmm. It was drastically different. In the heyday of being the youth pastor, we had more kids in our youth program than we as a church had in our church. So it was a very different, but also a humbling experience. And I think over the 4 years, that early hope of like, hey, we have to change, we have to grow in order that God can continue to have his way with this church. I think we got to see that come to fruition to a point.
I agree.
And I think that, and I hope that it gets to continue to be built upon by the next pastor and the next pastor and the next pastor and so on and so forth. That we've worked hard to build a firm foundation that others can continue to build upon.
Yeah, and I'll say before we get to our next question, because I know Joby wants to go on to that, but you've said it twice now in your answer there, firm foundation. And again, when I told you this last Sunday when I was reviewing pictures and video from your first Sunday, I love how you foreshadowed our upcoming or our past stewardship campaign of the firm foundation that we're building on here at First UMC. I mean, you said that your first Sunday. I went back and looked at your next year, first Sunday. You mentioned it again. I went back and looked at the video of July, your first Sunday of your third year. You mentioned it again. And then our fourth year, we did a firm foundation stewardship campaign. So I love that you had that idea that God had placed that on your heart and to build that here at our church. And I think we've done that and under your leadership and continued, and hopefully we'll continue that.
Well, and I think there's just so much potential for it. So
I agree. So when you look back over the last several years, what are some memorable moments that you can recall that you want to share with us?
they were all terrible. So no, I'm just kidding.
No, that's the new series you're preaching on, the terribles. No, I mean the parables.
Oh, the
Or the
parables,
terribles, yeah.
You know, and in all honesty, I've been spending a lot of time reflecting. You know, our first year here, there was a lot of relationship building. So, you know, one of my earliest and fondest memories was just getting to sit down and have coffee and talk with people those first year, 2 years, hearing stories, even in the midst of good and bad things, you know, sitting with families and talking as we were walking through funerals or things of that nature. I think one of my favorite memories early on was, you know, one of the first baptisms we did. Then, you know, we had new members who joined the church, and we had a vacation Bible school where a lot of us asked, like, are kids actually, like, are they actually going to show up? And then we had, you know, 50 kids who came, and every year we've averaged, you know, 50 or more kids being present, which is crazy when we as a church only have, you know, 5, 6, 7, less than 10 kids. But then once we started to do those Christmas events, I think that's one of my fondest memories is just the way the church rallied around the idea of loving the community, and then the community embracing this crazy idea that the pastor came up with and responding by being present.
Yeah. Watching
as the principals from the local schools and students and teachers came out and participated. That is one of those legacy images that I think I'm going to carry with me for a long time because it's a fond memory. The Christmas events, the Easter extravaganzas, the things that we have done to meet people. Those have always been great, but the more I thought about it, it was something that I'm going to hold on to near and dear, something that actually happened this past Sunday when that little video came on at the end, and I was just looking around, and there was a lot of people who were very moved by that little slideshow. But when the picture of Holton came up, me baptizing Holton, and I could see that Holton's mom was very moved by that, that's one of those memories that I'm going to just hold on to, because those are the moments that I live for. It's like those tangible faith moments of taking next steps and going deeper, like Holton has been able to do and Raylan's been able to do, as well as a number of our other students.
Yeah, growing our flock, right? Or your flock under God's leadership and
baptizing. And we're in this together.
Yeah, baptizing, encouraging, and sharing the word. I mean, getting the next generation involved. It's actually one of the reasons I chose that photo. Yeah. Was it? I actually felt like that summed up a lot of your 4 years of what you've been trying to do at this church.
And it really spoke to that. It did.
So tell us a time when you really felt God moving powerfully in the life of this church. When was the time you really saw his presence?
You know, I think there's been a number of times where we've we've watched and witnessed as God has tangibly shown up. But I think as of late, one of the things that I've been noticing is the consistency of people who are present, the consistency of people who are giving their time, their talent, their treasure, whether it's through the prayer group or the We Care team or the band or the tech team and the greeters, and I could go on and on and on. But I think one of the powerful ways that God has really been moving is, when I got to the church, the morale of the church was maybe at an all-time low.
Mm-hmm.
There was a handful of people who had one foot out the door, and I felt like the term of a turnaround pastor, either turn this church around or prepare it to close. And I never wanted to see the church close, because when I first got to the church, the word that God laid on my heart was the word potential. That this church had and still continues to have a lot of potential. And I think God powerfully moved in it, that we watched as the 30 became 50, which became 60, which became 90. And we've got about 100 to 125 active people. Now, granted, not everybody shows up in person on Sunday. But our numbers have increased, which means our influence has increased, which means our ability to disciple and evangelize and see people take next steps has increased. So I think God is powerfully moved by keeping this church alive.
I agree.
And I think the impact in the community too. I mean, we haven't, we don't, we had this discussion recently, right? We don't go out and serve or share the gospel with our community to get them to come to our church. We go to share the gospel and share the grace, and it's up to them what the next steps are. We hope it's at our church, but you and I have talked about, if they're going somewhere else too, that's great, as long as they're getting a relationship with God and as long as they're hearing the message and living their life in that aspect. And I think that's one of the things for me personally that you brought to our church for the last 4 years, is having us look at ourselves as a church and what we can do for our community, and not being spread too thin about the things we were doing, but kind of intentional focus on the areas that we needed to bring God into our church life and our community life.
Well, it's the difference between like a shotgun blast, which just kind of sprays out and hits a little bit of everything, versus kind of like, that focused single bullet, right? A lot of churches do a lot of things, but they don't do anything well. And when I got to PSJ, I realized we had our fingers in so many things, but we weren't really doing anything with excellence. We were doing a lot of things okay, but nothing with excellence. And having to do some refining, and you guys have heard me say this, and some of the churches heard me say this, that like the refining process for our church went through the 3 S's. It was, some things got shelved, which was, all right, we're going to hold on to this and we'll come back to it later. Some things got scrapped, like, hey, we just can't do this anymore. It's not who we are. And other things got stoked, and like we stoked those fires, and those things were the things that we did better and better and better. But the more we kept trying to do everything, we became, our own worst enemies. The Apostle Paul says that, like, when he was preaching the gospel, he became all things to all people. And sometimes we hear that and we think, oh, we have to be all things to all people. Like, that's not what he meant. In our local church setting, we cannot be all things to all people.
No.
But we have to be something to someone. And the more that we focused in on being something to someone, the more refined we became and the better we became. So I think that was one of those powerful moves that God was doing by refining us and kind of revealing to us who we really, really are.
So how has your time here at Port St. John shaped you personally as well as spiritually?
That's a wonderful question, because going back to that whole imposter syndrome, I feel like 4 years later, I don't feel like an imposter anymore. I feel like that I understand better what it means to be a senior pastor. I think if if anything, these were the years that I needed to refine myself as a leader, to refine my capacity for pastoral care and for guidance and for leadership, because I wasn't given those opportunities in other ways. So like I had to really tangibly do those things. And where in the beginning I felt like I was not fully equipped or fully capable, I feel like today I've grown to be able to do those things. I also think that a lot of my relationship with God has grown where I've become far more dependent. I recognize that there maybe had been early on in my ministry some seasons of arrogance where, oh, I'm skilled enough or I'm competent enough. And it wasn't until I stepped into the role of a senior pastor that I realized, no, I don't know what I'm doing. And having to lean into God and have to allow him to, take control and guide me more really taught me, more about dependence and my faith. So I feel like I'm coming out better on the other side than when I came in.
Yeah,
Great. Can we start your 4 years now?
Hey, now listen.
Well, I was actually going to say, from a personal standpoint, and I look around here, the three of us talking, Joby and I have actually talked about this, that how much you have impacted and influenced us as a church and us as a couple. From what you're saying, right? When you first got here, we visited you before you came to church, our church. And in those first years, we really thought you were delivering God's message. You were doing really well. But I can honestly say, and we've talked about over the last 4 years, you've just gotten better.
Well, thank you.
I think part of that is exactly what you just said, is that you're leaning into God. You're depending on God more. And we can see that through you, that God, you're sharing God's message. It's like you say in the pulpit all the time, I want to be known as the guy who talks about Jesus all the time. You are that guy, and you do a really good job. Jesus uses you to share that message. And I can say for a couple, we've been praying for years on how we get together and do it. And, you kind of pushed us into this podcast, which we've been enjoying. Even Joby's been enjoying it, but it's opened up a new relationship or a new spot in our relationship where we're sharing God more. We're talking about the sermons more. We're sharing more. So I just wanted to let you know that that's been very impactful from you. And I've seen that change in you over 4 years. And you've pushed that out onto us as a church. So
I appreciate that. Thank you.
So obviously you don't come here alone. You came here with an amazing family, and Carrie and Kayla and Ella have been such an incredible part of this journey with you. So how has this part of your story impacted them?
Besides them, I looked at the picture when they first got here.
Oh my gosh, Kayla, I don't mean to be rude, but girlfriend, you were so young.
And
Heavens to Betsy, that picture.
They have absolutely grown up, both of them. And it's just amazing I can't believe in 4 years how much your two girls have grown.
Thank you.
And, but yeah, how has this journey impacted you and them?
A lot of me having to sit down and listen to God, came out of me just learning more of what it means to be a dad. I remember years ago when I was talking about prayer, I shared a story about how when Ella was little, and she was learning to walk, and she kind of crawls around, pulls herself up, looks up at me, places her hands up, pick her up, and she buries her head against my chest and just kind of babbles. And I remember this moment as being, God saying to me, this is what prayer looks like. And throughout this journey, I've had to really allow my kids to, help give me guidance in, what's best for them. As a parent, you learn, you got to listen, you've got to allow them to have input. So we started talking a lot about, what would it look like if we made this shift, and the girls, I was very nervous, like, they're doing well in school and they've got some connections, would it be a good time for them? And, when Carrie and I had been talking and finally brought the girls in on this conversation, they were like, Dad, they thought it was a good idea. They thought the timing was right. And I think they were really far more open and keen to this than I think we were giving them credit for. So once they were kind of like, no, we're good. We'll be okay. We'll make do. We'll reestablish some old relationships. We'll build some new relationships, which is exactly what Carrie and I have been saying. We just kind of realized, okay, they're okay with what's going on. But reflecting on the 4 years that they've been there, just as you were saying, like they've grown so much. Ella grew in her soccer. She had the opportunity to play varsity soccer at Space Coast, which was amazing. Kayla got to be in several of the different plays at the school, and
Which were amazing.
Yeah, and she really took a keen liking to culinary. So she would, cook at the house, and I watched as they grew, and I think their story is really just starting. So this next season of life is really going to help bring out what God has next for them too, and I really believe that.
Well, it's been an incredible blessing for us to be able to be a part of their lives. So, Ella, we still want to come to soccer, so be sure to let us know. And Kayla, gosh darn it, we'll be at any play you call us to. Don't you worry.
Oh, yeah, let us know. And Carrie, I've already told you this. The big impact is I'm going to miss your scones, but I know where you live, so expect some phone calls.
Yeah, Carrie.
I'm all about the food. Sorry, PC. I'm all about the food. I will say I love your family. Like I said, watching them grow, the two girls have been amazing. And like I said, watching you grow. Another favorite photo I chose in your thing was, I didn't know if you knew it was taken or not, but during Christmas service where Stacy took the picture of you and Carrie sitting in the front row there, it just showed so much about how you two are in this together. This isn't just a job for you. This is a calling for both of you.
Yeah.
And very impactful for people to see that you're doing this as a couple.
Thank you.
Well, as we wrap up our first segment of this wonderful show, we have questions. Are there any specific stories or moments with our congregation that really stand out to you? Anything that you'll carry with you and think back and go, oh, yeah, I remember that, or...
Oh, man, you put me on the spot here. I think there's too many, but, one, it just comes to my mind, so I'll share this. I think one of the stories that will stick with me is this past December, our family got selected to be the Viper Family of the Month over at the high school, and Carrie and I had joked, I'm like, our kids don't even go to school here. Like, how are we the Family of the Month?
That's an impact in the community, though.
Well, and that's the whole thing. It really, as much as it was like the Tabone family, it was the church family, because it's the ladies who go and volunteer in the clothing closet, and it's our club that we sponsor, and it's the little sweet treats that we donate, and going to the football games and cooking the meals. It's the way the church has loved that school, that when I shared with the principal and the athletic director that we were leaving, they were both like, why are you leaving? You want a job here? We want to keep you here. Like, our school is better because you're around.
Yeah.
And it was really heartwarming. So I think that's one of those things that I'm just going to really hold on to as we move forward. The impact that the church has really had in our community, and in particular in that high school. Yeah, and
I would say before we wrap this up for our part one, we always try to give a challenge to the church and the community. And, I didn't have one planned for today until we were talking, but you just provided it. And that is, it is a church family thing, the impact we make on the community. So the challenge for us this week, I think, as a community and as a church, is to continue that, to impact each other. We as a church need to step up, continue the ministries we've started at all the three schools. We need to support those, support the next generation. And a community needs to keep coming out and supporting the church. We're going to keep putting on Light Up Port St. John and stuff, and we're in this together. We're going to be, I've heard you say it many times, we're better together.
Yes, we are.
Not just only as a church, but as a church and a community. We can make great things happen right here in Port St. John.
So if you loved what you heard from Chris today, we invite you to stick around for next week, because we're going to be back again to ask him some more questions before he wraps up his time here at our church. Thanks again, Chris, for being with us.
This is Sundays on Monday, brought to you by First UMC Port St. John. If you enjoyed today's episode, be sure to subscribe, share, and stay connected with us throughout the week. Have thoughts, questions, or prayer requests? We'd love to hear from you. Until next time, keep the faith, live with purpose, and remember, Sunday's message is just the beginning. See you next episode.